Alright, we're going to start on the Android stuff right now. I will tell you this may be a very different period just because of the fact that I get 2 headaches a year and today's the day for one of them. Alright, I literally can't tell you the last year I took an aspirin, but I took 2 of them before class. It feels like somebody put something through my eye and it came out the other end of my head. So if we have to take a break early, we're taking a break early. Alright, so this, you all should have gotten this a lot earlier. This is the first edition where I've got the second edition. But we're going to look at some of the stuff that's in here. We're going to go over Chapter 1 right now. After we go over Chapter 1, then you're going to end up using the some of the stuff that's in the folder that I sent you. One thing I want to say about this, because it's a little bit, we're going to be using Java, but a lot of the stuff that we're going to be doing is different, and it's intricate, and it's easy to screw it up. So the idea is, if all we do for the rest of the week is get through the first few chapters and look and build 1 or 2 very simplistic apps, that's fine. All right, I'd rather do that, but have people have an understanding of what we're doing. All right, so I'm not going to go through the stuff. This is why you should use a Muroc book, etc. You've heard all that shtick, or you probably have seen it in your Muroc books before. So if you look in here, here is the quick table of contents. We're going to go over Chapter 1 today. I'm not going to go over Chapter 2 because Chapter 2 is on developing Android in Eclipse. We're not using Eclipse. All right. We will go over Chapter 3. We will go over Chapter 4. We'll go over 5 through 9. All right. I don't know if we'll have time to go through 10 through 12, and that's fairly complex stuff. We may go over it. We may not. All right. I'd like to go over as much of 13 through 16 as we can, because for 2 reasons. First of all, you build a task list that I think everybody understands. Second of all, it uses databases. All right. So I think that would be a good idea. We will look at Chapter 17, how to deploy an app, but I don't plan on doing anything with working with locations and maps. The good news is you have that information and you have it on, in PDF format. So if the app that you end up creating toward the end of the class uses maps or uses locations with maps, you at least have a resource that you can look at. All right. So I'm just going to jump right into Chapter 1. So as you can see here, there's an overview. I'm not going to sit there. They've got, what they do is they say, here are some of the types of Android apps you can create. And they give you a bunch of different, headings. Here are some different devices that use Android. I'm not going to go through any of that stuff. But I do want to look at a couple of the things that are in there that you might think typically we wouldn't look at. All right. So to start with, kind of surprises people, at least at times, when they take a look at what's in here. But as it says, Android is a Linux-based operating system. All right. There has been a fight for years over which is more popular, Android or iOS. And I don't even know what the current stats are. I don't care. But one number I heard was there are somewhere in the area of 2 to 5 billion Android apps that are out there. So they're not going away soon. All right. We'll be using the tablets, not today, probably not this week, but probably we'll start with them next week. Okay. And if you do have an Android phone and you have the connection for your phone, you can use that too. The other thing that you can do is literally, this is different than with iPhones. With iPhones, to my knowledge, all right, you can't sit there like, let's say Amin created this really cool app for an iPhone. He can't just sit there and give me the executable and have me put it on my phone and load it. I don't think that'll work. It will work with Android. All right, you can do that kind of stuff. All right. And if you don't know it, I mean, they give some examples here, but one of the biggest ones are home automation and home appliances. It's today, so much stuff is debugged just using Android. It's funny because I went in, I don't know how, but I started talking to one of the automotive instructors, and we were talking like in the hallway, and he goes, oh yeah, let me show you this. So I walked down to the automotive center down here with him, and he was showing me that right now they do so much of their work is literally, they all have tablets, all right, in what they do. And it's just, that's not all that surprising really anywhere today, all right. They go through some types of apps in here. Again, is that important? I guess it depends on whether or not you're going to build one of those types of apps, all right. Now, what I do want to do is the history that's in here. I don't care about that. But I do want to mention to you that if you turn up to page 11, as you'd guess, that's out of date. Because when your book came out, that's 2013. But if I go to this URL, which I happen to have up here, this is what I want to show you because I want to make sure that you get this. And that is, let's see, where is that one? Right here. All right. So this is the dashboard that tells you with the different versions that are out there, who's using what, all right? Now, why is this important? Well, for one thing, if you take a look, right now, and this was, the actual date on this was February 5th, 2018. So this is pretty up to date. The estimate is there's only 1.1% of the population is using Oreo, okay? Which is kind of surprising because it's been out for a bit. But the other thing is, when you start to look up here, and you look at ice cream sandwich and you look at gingerbread, that's pretty much like IE6 and IE7. You shouldn't be using it anymore. But one thing to realize is when you build this, and you're going to start seeing this stuff today, you have to put in there a minimum API, which is one of those numbers that you see there. All right. So let's say, because a common one to use for a minimum API is either Jelly Bean, but even more common today is probably Lollipop right here. So if we did the addition here, what do we have? 5, 25, 52, 74, 80. That's going to grab over 80% right there. All right. But there is a chance, if that's the minimum SDK that you're supporting, that people who have KitKat on back, there might be features in there that they cannot use. It's even possible that if they try to run the app, they may not be able to. All right? The bad thing is, so you say, well, geez, I'll just make it pretend then. And then everybody can use it. Yeah. But then you can't use the new features that are in here because that's your minimum API. So as they say, it's kind of a balancing act. And when we start to go into this, the system will actually recommend an API for you. And I think it's probably going to be, it's either Jelly Bean, KitKat, or Lollipop. All right? And if you look on here, you notice there's 15, 16, 17, etc. These are all different versions of Jelly Bean right here. These are different versions of Lollipop, different versions of Oreo, etc. You may or may not have heard about this. It's not a big thing. But they always claim that these are always after some sweet treat. That's where they come up with their names for everything. All right? But again, if you look at that picture, and the URL is the same one that's shown in the book. All right? But the thing is that what's shown in the book for that chart is old. It's way out of date. All right. And they go through this. As you develop, you must figure out what your minimum API is. I already mentioned that, so that's fine. Now, the next thing, you look at it, you're like, okay, I guess you got to go over this stuff, but man, it's boring. All right. Well, what they show here is the system architecture for the way this stuff is set up. All right. And they're showing it in 4 different layers. The farther down you go, the more machine-centric it is. The farther up you go, the more user-centric it is. You're probably never going to do anything that's going to deal with a Linux kernel, ever. You're probably going to do almost nothing that's going to deal with most of that other stuff. We will look at the SQLite library later on. All right. And I do want to mention, because this was the Dalvik virtual machine, that's outdated too now. All right. Because now it's been replaced with what's called the Android runtime. I'm going to show you that in just a minute. All right. But what they mention here is they go through the levels. It says the bottom layer of the stack is Linux, an open source operating system that's portable and secure. So that's all Linux stuff that you see in the red on the bottom. The second layer contains the native libraries. Now what's interesting, these libraries are written in C or C++. They're not written in Java. They're written in C and C++ because they tend to be the fastest programming languages when you run an application. All right, and it says how they include the Dalvik virtual machine. And again, that's right here. But if I come out here, I just want to, as I show you stuff, I want to get rid of it. So this, again, this is a more extensive history. I just Wikipedia'd it. So if you want to know a little bit more about the different versions of Android, you can take a look there. But this is the Dalvik. Notice how it starts. Dalvik is a discontinued process. All right, which means that's not the way that it's done anymore. All right, and they even mention, it's a little bit later on in here, there, the successor for Dalvik is the Android runtime, or ART. All right, why? Because they're always trying to write and create something so your programs run faster, they run better, etc. All right. This week might be the only time that you will be using the emulator in Android. And you'll probably be thanking God at the end of the week that it'll be the last time that you're using the emulator. Because depending on the speed of your machine, the emulator can take up to 10 minutes to come up. All right, it can take as little as 30 seconds to come up. But I know some of you in here have slower machines, so it may take a while for it to come up. I don't know. All right, so they explain in here how these things are compiled and run, and yet, again, it's a little bit dated, just so you know. All right, now, do you really have to worry about this stuff? No, I suppose, unless something was to really go wrong, but this is the picture that's on page 15 of your book. And as it says, when you develop an Android app, you typically use an IDE, such as Eclipse. We're not going to use Eclipse. All right. I'm recommending that since we're done with the Java part of the class right now, if you're strapped for room on your machine, that you uninstall IntelliJ IDEA, because today we're going to install Android Studio, unless you're Colin, because he already did it. And what I did was I literally uninstalled mine yesterday, because I'm going to go through the same process with you. So if you have any problems, all right, hopefully we can face them together. All right. But they go through the steps in here, and again, it's not that it's that important that you memorize these or anything else. All right. Android does come with a built-in emulator called an AWD. That's an Android virtual device. You can literally set up scores of different AVDs for your machine. All right. Plus, what you'll notice when we start getting into this is when you go and you start building your projects, it's going to basically say to you, what are you building it for? And you get to choose. Do you want to build it for a phone? Do you want to build it for a watch? Do you want to build it for a TV, etc. All right, and you're going to see all that stuff as we go on. All right. Now, most of this is still correct, but it's done a little bit differently internally. All right. It says when the IDE builds a project, it puts the files for the project into an Android package or an APK file, and I think it's still pretty much done like that. And to my knowledge, if you have the APK file, and let's say that you would take that and you would zip it and send it to yourself, and you had an Android watch, let's say, and you took it and were able to get to it on your watch, and then you unzipped it, you should be able to run that on your watch or your tablet or whatever, your phone, doesn't matter. Doesn't really matter. You should be able to. All right. Bless you. Now, this is what we're going to be creating in here. So I don't want to spend much time on it because we'll have a whole chapter or two on it. But this is what we're creating. And I want you to understand a couple things. First of all, what this is right here, it's what's referred to as a soft keyboard. All right? If this is my opinion, for whatever it is or is not worth, what you'll find is when this soft keyboard comes on the screen, by and large, almost always, you can still use your physical keyboard. Did you hear that? But don't do it. Because what you're trying to do is emulate or simulate what somebody who's going to be using your app is going to do. And if they're buying an app from you, the chances are pretty good they want to be able to use it on a phone. All right? You're not going to have this big, hairy keyboard that you're going to have available for a phone. All right? Now, when you look at this, you can't tell, but the keyboard is literally the GUI for this would go all the way down here, all the way. But you don't see all of it now because some of it is being covered up by the keyboard. Not only that, if you look at the keyboard, what's kind of interesting about it is it's a numeric keyboard. What's good about that is that means that if you've got a program that is expecting numbers and you set it up for a numeric keyboard, you don't have to worry about the user entering in anything that's non-numeric, except for blank. All right, we'll talk about how to handle that as we go on. All right. Plus, the way that it's set up, if I come in here and I have a numeric keyboard, I don't think it'll work. At least it used to not work. So if I came in here and typed in 34.60.60, it wouldn't take that. You can only have one decimal place. All right, so that's the first thing. Second thing, 1, bill amount, percent, tip, total, the actual total, the actual tip, the actual percent, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 of the things that are right there are labels. All right. 2 of the things here, and that probably makes sense, are buttons. Okay. Every time you click this button right here, that percentage goes down by 1%. Every time you click there, it goes up by 1%. The only thing that's used in here for input or output is right here. And that's called a JText field. Now that's not new because we talked about it, the JText field, actually about a week or so ago. All right, so you've at least seen that kind of stuff before. All right, there's all sorts of weird stuff that'll happen until you get used to this. All right, for instance, if you don't remember, typically if you touch done, that keyboard will go away. All right, but not always. It's supposed to, let's put it that way. Now, what you might find confusing when we start looking at this stuff, when you look at that, you're like, oh my God, not another frickin' programming language. This is all written for you. Literally, every single bit of this is written for you. So as we come out there, and you'll learn this fast enough, but as you come out here and you build this interface right here, what happens is that's what gets written for you. All right? You're going to start to see this stuff today already. All right, but I'm just trying to have some kind of an understanding here. Now, good, bad, indifferent, it really doesn't matter. But notice we've got here match. If you look up here, it says width equals match parent, height equals match parent, width equal wrap content, height equals wrap content. There are different ways that you can set things up so they will take up as much room as they can or just the amount of room that they need. We're going to get into all this stuff as we go on in here. All right? But notice there's the text view. So that's where you put the information in. Some of the stuff in here will probably look kind of foreign to you. All right? Notice that there's, over here it says Android padding 10 dp. Then it says Android text size 20 sp. dp stands for density pixels. All right? Everything that you set an amount for, other than text, will always be set in dps. Anytime you work with text, it'll be SP, and I think that's scalable pixels. All right? And the idea is it's supposed to react to the type of medium that you're using. All right? And you'll notice some of the things that are in here. Text style equal bold. Well, that should be pretty obvious what that is. All right. And if you like, if I want to bold something, do I have to come in there and do that? No. There'll be a properties window that we'll see as we go on in here, and there'll be something there for font. You'll go underneath it, and you'll find, font style or whatever, and you'll set it. That's it. Now, another thing that may look a little weird here, notice it says text equals @string / bill amount label. What you're going to learn real fast is you can, I think all they want you to put in there is, what is it? Whatever it is. If we want to put something in there, let's say we wanted it to say hello, okay? We literally could put in there Android : text equals double quote hello double quote. Did you all hear that? You can do that. Anytime you're putting anything in here, you can put it in directly. But it's recommended that you never do that. If you do it like that, what's going to happen is you're going to see over here on your screen, if you look where my mouse is, I think it's over here, you're going to get all these flags. And they're going to say, that's the old-fashioned way of putting in text. Don't do that. Instead, what you do is you've got a special file that's called strings.xml, and in that special file, you'll put all your text in there. Why would you do that? The idea is you're doing that for what's called localization reasons. And localization is a weird term because it really means internationalization. So the idea is if I create this really cool app and I set it up like this, and somebody finds out about it and they want it for whatever reason in France, okay, then I can go and basically create the equivalent of my strings.xml file, but do a French version, and nothing has to change. All right. Some of the stuff, like I said, that's in here. Notice edit text, request focus. That should pretty much make sense to you what that is. All right. So they explain all that. I don't want to do that now. It's way too easy to play head games with you, screw you up, etc. And I don't have any desire to do that. You'll notice that even for the buttons, rather than just manually putting a plus sign and manually putting a minus sign in there, you use that string.xml file. And the recommendation, again, is that you always do that. Always. So this is what you end up putting in that strings.xml file. And it looks weird. Why would you do that? Because that's what Android expects. That's the way that it's expected that when you write an app, that's the way it's expected you're going to do it. All right? I'm not saying you do it that way because I told you so. No. Yes?
I was going to say, so is this something that you have to manually type into this XML file?
Yes. Is there software that would generate it for you? Probably. I don't know what it is, but there probably is. All right. Now, when we get going in this, it's going to come up, when we start running this, sooner or later you're going to get a screen come up that talks to you about an activity. And for lack of better words, an activity is like a form that we had, for example, in C#. All right? An Android app can have multiple activities. You can do everything on one screen, which is what they're doing in this example, or you can put it on multiple screens. Okay, just so you know that. But eventually, for example, if I want something to happen when I click those buttons, I've got to come back into Java and put in some code. What you're going to notice if you look up on the screen right here, all right, you're going to end up doing a lot of import statements. And I don't know, maybe you can do this, but I don't remember seeing a lot of import. For example, notice there's a bunch of Android.widgets in there. And I don't remember ever seeing an Android program where it would have like import Android.widget.star. I don't know if that's supported here or not. I really don't. But what's going to happen is as you start dragging stuff out on the screen, okay, the system typically will provide this stuff for you. And if it doesn't provide it for you, it'll be the same kind of thing that we did in IntelliJ IDEA where you'll click on there, you hold down on your Alt key and you hit enter, and then it'll enter it for you. All right. So when you look at this, hopefully this makes sense if you look right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These 6 things that are right there are pretty much corresponding to most of the stuff that you saw on the interface. All right, there's the edit text, there's the text view, all right, there's the button, there's a button, and I guess I sort of misspoke before because we're going to call these labels, we're going to call text views, all right, and what we call text boxes, we're going to call edit text. Now that should make sense. The word edit would imply that you could change what's in there, all right. Now, there's so much stuff, and again, it's not my goal in here to start screwing you up already, okay? But you'll notice there's an OnCreate. For lack of better words, the OnCreate is kind of like a constructor. It's where everything starts, okay? And notice super, so you know what that means. There'll be a file in here. I'm warning you, for lack of better words. All right, when we start to create this, and I'm going to show it to you, but there'll be a special file that's called an R file. Okay? And what I'm telling you is, what that R file has in it is it takes all of this XML that's written here, and then it takes all the Java that's written here, and it allows them to talk to one another. If you change even a line of that R file, even a line, you can totally screw up your program. And even if you change it and change it back again, the program might be screwed up where you can't use it. All right, I'm speaking from personal experience. So what are we doing right here? Well, if you look right here, we've got this find view by ID, and it says R dot. So what that is saying is, go out to that special R file, find where that thing is, and basically give me a reference to it. But when it gives you a reference, by default, it's not of type edit text or text view or button, so you have to cast it. Again, a lot of that stuff, you look at it and you go like, I'll never understand any of this stuff. It'll make sense when you start doing it. That's all I can tell you. All right? And if you want more than I just gave you, so if you want, if you consider that not to be a very good explanation or whatever, then just take a look at the text that, on the following page, because it'll explain it. Much of the stuff that's in here, when you look at this, especially what's right in here where I've got my mouse going there, that stuff, that should make sense to you. All right, did I jump into chapter 2 already? No, I didn't. Okay. All right, there's yet another file here that you see on this page, and it's another one of these XML files. This is called an Android manifest file. This is kind of a file. It's an overview file. And why would you ever use this? Do I need this? Well, typically, you're not going to do a lot in this file. All right? But we're going to go through an example, and I don't know if we'll get there today or not. But if you look right here, this is where, if you set this, it's a portrait. All right? By default, your app is designed to work in both portrait mode and in landscape mode. And if you set it here, then if the person tips their phone, it'll still be in portrait mode. Sometimes, people do that because they just don't want to have it be anything other than portrait, or if you're developing a game, a lot of times what people do is they set that to landscape. All right? So it only works in landscape mode, for lack of better words. Now that's it. I would recommend that as we get to the end of these, because I want us to get going on it because I think that's how you're going to learn. But you might want to at least look through the summary, okay? You probably don't have the code that goes along with this. I have to see if I still have it. And if I do, I don't mind giving you that code. The code that comes with a book. That's fine. All right? Again, I'm skipping chapter 2. We're not going to go over this at all because we're not going to be using Eclipse. They do have some code in there, so if you want to look at that, they have you create a couple simple apps. You could do a similar thing, but you won't be using Eclipse to do it. Now, before we go and look at this, how to develop your first app, I'm going to jump back to where I was before, and that is right here, and there's a few things to show you. First of all, this site right here, developer.android.com. That is the main site for anything Android. All right? What's kind of weird, and I want to show you this, all right, because I found this out, and that is, you might think, okay, developer.android.com, why didn't they just use android.com? Because someone else had already grabbed it. All right? And there's a lot more in here than used to be in here. All right? When I looked at this last, this was almost an empty website. There's stuff in here, and I don't know how good it is or how bad it is, but what I'm trying to tell you is it's developer.android.com. That's the main site. Not only that, all of the documentation for this is out here. All right? So if you want to see the API, if you want to see how what everything is, how everything is set up, this is where you go. All right? Now, what we're going to go to in just a couple minutes is here. Okay? We're just going to go to developer, android.com, but if you go out to this URL, I'll put it up here, I'll make it bigger. You can all do this right now. All right, I'll try to make it big enough that everybody can read it. Okay, yeah, I know there's a lot of ways that you can get there. You're right. You can just go out to the developer.android.com too. You're right. Or you can go there. All right. And what we want to do is download Visual Studio. Notice by default it's 3.0.1 for Windows. It's also a PEG. It's 683 meg. That's why I'm saying, especially for those of you in here who have slow machines, you might want to consider getting rid of IntelliJ IDEA first. If you don't know how to do that, let's just very quickly look. All right, that is, I'm taking for granted that everybody in this room has got a search bar down here. Okay, if you go down into your search bar and you type in control panel, there's other ways to get to it, I know that. But if you type that in, you're going to get to right here. All right, so if you go down into your search bar and you type in control panel, now this is where mine is, I'm running Windows 10, but yours should look at least somewhat similar. And if we look in here, it's alphabetized, but it goes across. You want to find the thing that says Programs and Features. And then what you should have in here is something that looks like this. And if you click on the name, it should put it in alphabetic order for you if it's not already. All right, so if you look here, there's IntelliJ IDEA. I don't know how big it is. It's not telling me. All right. But if you don't want that anymore, and I'm not saying you do and I'm not saying you don't, but if you don't want that anymore, you could just right mouse click on that and choose uninstall. Now, the only thing I'm going to tell you about doing that, okay, it is possible for you to bring up regular Java programs in Android Studio that we're about to go and download. You can do that. But it's like a 3-page document on how you have to do it. So I've never tried. So I'm keeping IntelliJ IDEA on the machine that I have. All right? And if you say, it's never been a problem, I've added all sorts of stuff and everything still seems to run, then I wouldn't change it. All right? Has everybody gone out to this site or the developer.android.com and found this download button? All right, because if you have, okay, you just want to click download. All right. Now, let's suppose that one or more of you are having problems with this. And again, I can see Valerie's machine a little bit, But other than that, I really can't see anybody's machine. You know, so if Amin's having problems or Colin's having problems, even Dominic over there, I have a hard time telling. And sometimes people fall behind, and for whatever reason, they don't like to put their hand up. Okay? So, what I have given you in this, in that folder that I had you all grab from the flash drive, did you get that, Brady? Did it make it? Oh, okay. All right. Well, you'll all have it in a minute. But what's on the flash drive, and I had to put it on a flash drive for today because one of the documents was more than 8 meg. All right. But we're going to go over a few documents on here. We're going to go over this one. How to create an Android app with Android Studio. In that particular article. And it's about 14 pages long. I didn't print out hard copies because the second one we're going to go through is 45 pages, and the third one we're going to go through is 31 pages. All right? Collectively, that's 78 pages, plus this one is 21. That's almost 100 pages. Even back to back, that's 50 pages. And for 9 of you, that's 450 pages. That's almost an entire frickin' ream of paper. And I didn't want to do that. So I've given you electronic copies. All right? But what I'm telling you is in this article right here, they go through the steps that we're going to go through right now. So if you want to bring that article up and follow along, maybe you have a harder time following me, I don't know. All right? But by and large, what we're going to end up doing is pretty much just accepting the defaults for just about everything that we do. There should be no reason why that won't work for us. All right? So, coming over here, and I don't need that anymore. Let's see. Came back to here, and here, and here. All right, so I'm over here. Terms and conditions. All right? People always ask, should I really read these things? I will tell you, I will answer it this way. All right? For you guys, I would, you have to do the I have read, etc. Okay? You have to click that button. But I would take a look at them if I were you just for one reason, because what you are expected to do for the end of this class is to develop your own app, and you are expected to at least submit it to the Google Play Store. All right? And there may be something that's in here that could be relevant to that. All right? They might say something about you trying to rip off somebody else's code or whatever. I don't know. All right, but I'm just going to click on I have read this, and notice then the button that was gray now becomes blue. Okay, if you do the same, then you can click the download Android Studio for Windows. All right, so I get this over here. You probably already know this, but I'm just going to right mouse click on it and choose open when done, and it'll basically be the executable. Okay. And it says opening, it still says in 2 minutes. Remember, it's 683 meg. I don't know how all that stuff works with all of us basically, how our connection is. And I know that a lot of it is done through St. Louis, etc. So you might find this is really slow even though it's just 10 of us, if 10 of us are trying to do this at once, or 9 of us. All right? But again, if you have any problems, the first document that's in here that we're going to go through, we're going to go through this whole thing, even though we're doing a bunch of it now, is called How to Create an Android App with Android Studio. All right? Now, I'm not saying that I agree with everything they've said in here, but it's a fairly generic document. All right? If you look up at me here, there's also 2 other documents that I've given you today. They're both from a site that I'm going to show you in just a minute that's called raywenderlich.com. And the first one is entitled Beginning Android Development Part 1, Installing Android Studio. and beginning Android development part 2 using Android Studio. So you might say, well, then why don't we go through this document? Because this one expects you're doing it on a Mac. All right? Which is why I grabbed the other one. The steps are pretty much identical, but just to be sure. All right, now it's telling me it's going to open it in about 30 seconds. So far, we went to developer.android.com. We found Android Studio, the link to download it, and now the installer is getting ready, and we're just going to pretty much follow its instructions. All right, it's telling me it's complete. All right, so it says, do you want to run this file? This is pretty much what yours should do if you do it this way. All right, so I'm going to click Run. Do I want to let it make changes? Yes. This is the same picture that you see on page 4 of the article that I just gave you. All right. So, as you can guess, well, you got 3 options. You can cancel out of it, you can back up, or you can do what we're going to do, and that is click Next. All right. And then it says, select which components you want to install. All right. And again, we're going to take the default. All right, so I'm going to click Next again. Notice this is the big thing. Even though it's 683 meg, notice the space required. 2.1 gig. All right. You know, if Amin raises his hand now and says, that's too much for me. All right, or if Tiffany does, I don't know what to tell you. Then you're going to have to go in and grab a package like, you can try it with IntelliJ IDEA, or you can grab Eclipse. They're smaller, they're smaller downloads. This is, this editor, this IDE was created by Google specifically for Android. All right? This is the accepted standard for Android development. Okay, so I'm just going to click Next again. Then it says, where do you want it? Notice where, at least on mine, where it puts it. All right? Under Program Files, Android Studio. Now, if you do this, and you get a message that it already exists, for instance, Colin downloaded it yesterday, and he's probably not following along right now, because it hasn't probably changed much in 24 hours. But let's say that he had done it a few months ago, and when he clicks Next, he's going to get a message that it already exists. All right? What most of the Java product or packages allow you to do is you can have multiple versions, but with this thing being 683 meg, I would not ever recommend doing that. So you should always, if you decide at a later time that you want to go back and possibly reinstall or do whatever, go to Control Panel and make sure you don't have it on there. All right. All right. So that's fine. The default location is fine. I'm clicking Next again, and it says select the Start menu, in which you would like to create the program's shortcuts. Well, again, I'm just going to take the default, so I'm going to tell it to install. Again, this may take quite a bit of time. This may take very little time. All right, I will tell you one place where I used to work at Blackhawk that has this place beat is the fact that where I worked there was at the central campus, and we had the best internet out of all their campuses. So it went fairly quickly. I don't know how long this, even right now, it doesn't look like it's terrible. All right. But you might find with yours that it might take quite a bit of time. Probably a good time to take a break. Thank you. Anybody who did not get a copy, get a chance to copy that folder? All right, then why don't we take a break? Let's plan on coming back at about 1:35, please. Mine's actually going very quickly.